Right. Well, I just wanted to start by I mean, this was, I think the crowd agrees, it's an incredible film, an amazing achievement. Sky, you were a professional aerialist. Tell us a little bit about the journey of making this film and how you first encountered these amazing characters.
Yeah, so as she said, I was a professional circus artist myself, and in 2010, some of my friends actually went to a circus, which actually ended up getting raided by the charity that supported these kids. So, hearing about that, I decided I wanted to go and meet these girls and just to kind of go and see if there was anything I could do. So I volunteered and ended up going I was there for a couple of months, and during that time, Saraswati's rescue ended up happening. So it ended up being quite a trip. I had a camera with me, and wasn't really, at that stage there wasn't really a plan for a documentary necessarily. It was I was going with both hats really, as a circus artist and wanting to just meet these girls. And I think the thing that really was a moment was their when I met them, they were very, very stigmatized and would not say they were from circuses, and it was considered deeply shameful to be from circuses. And what I saw were these incredibly beautiful, talented, amazing women that had all these incredible skills that would have been kind of recognised the world over as being amazing. So there was a moment where they kind of looked at me and were like, you're a circus girl too. And I think that was a beginning really of a long and amazing journey with these girls. And I think that was a place of trust that started at that point between us, that enabled the next six years. Yeah, yeah, that was that.
And then Kate, how did you come to be involved as well?
So again, it wasn't really planned. Nothing was really planned, but I knew Sky from working as an ethnographer over here, and I was just interested to go out and help her do a bit of filming. This was the second time you went over.
So that was 2011, wasn't it? Yeah.
So there was a long trip, and it's when they did their first circus show, which is in the film, the first time they performed. So originally we thought we might do a film about that, about them just starting to do circus again, and that would be the end of it, and we might make a bit of film. We made a film for the charity.
Yeah.
And then it just grew because we started to build a relationship with them.
And they wanted to tell their story as well.
Yeah, and as you said, once they started talking to you as a circus girl, they started talking more to each other. Mm. And in a way, we instigated conversations among them, I think, that helped them to talk about the past. And, we made it more and more okay, and we made it celebrated, that it started to become something that they were sharing with us as well. And it took a long time actually to get sort of, the full trust. I thought we were a bit mad, I think, because we just kept turning up with cameras, and they'd never really seen a documentary at that point, and we just kept wanting to film them doing things, and they just thought we were really strange. But eventually we became friends.
I mean, watching this, I was wondering to myself I just thought it would have been incredible to see them sort of go outside of Nepal and India and sort of see how circuses operate outside, and also the different kind of definition of a circus, and what was that like, kind of seeing them?
Well, I think that was a big part of that process, was that redefinition, and like you saw in Glastonbury, that kind of like, wow, this is actually this huge thing, and they had all like so many people just coming up to them at Glastonbury, just wow, amazed with what they were doing and so touched by what they were doing. And I think that was another really pinnacle moment for them to just kind of start shifting that narrative about themselves around, and that's been a huge part of the journey. And I think once that started to shift as well, and then there was the feeling to then want to start going deeper into the stories with them others and their own personal stories, and finding that confidence, I guess, to open that up a bit.
It's also worth saying, it's something we don't go into much in the film, but they had a lot of volunteers start to come over and work with them from all over the world. Like lots of circus artists from countries everywhere came and started teaching them. They were teaching them English then, and lots of skills. So they had a lot of they had a lot of meetings with all sorts of interesting people through their journey, learning to do circus again together. So that was really positive. We didn't incorporate that a lot, but you see a few of them at the
We
beginning.
wanted it to be really their voice in this.
Yeah, I think that was a conscious decision to.
Another thing that I really love about your film as well is that it is so empowering, the tone of it. I mean, I think there are so many, in terms of docs kind of focusing on trafficking, there is that tendency to be a little bit less empowering, and yet this film is very, very uplifting. It's very positive. You sort of, I think we all sort of feel that on this end of it. Was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, definitely, and I think for them as well, that there was not wanting to be kind of cast as victims was quite important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that grew as well as we got to know them, because we saw them go on a journey and become empowered themselves through their own work, and we kind of followed them on that, I think, and it was really important not to do the same, just focus on all the bad things that happen to people and have to retell that story. Instead, it's where they've come to now, and I think that was really, really important for us and for them.
The expression through their bodies as well, that was an important part of that journey, and that being a positive expression through finding that strength and creativity.
And working with them through that, because it initially was quite hard to make it a collaborative documentary, because they were so unfamiliar with the whole process and what we were doing, and so when we started to incorporate circus within the film, doing the little pieces where that became a way that we could work with them in a way that they understood better and enjoyed and were really empowered in, because that was their skill. So I think we found that a really good turning point in how we felt and how we could work together with them.
Is there something that you found particularly I mean, obviously this project is 6 years in the making, but was there a period that was very challenging, or what were some of the production challenges, or some of the...
I think...
It's pretty challenging, yeah.
I think, well, like with Saraswati, she was so kind of defensive and angry and hurt and all those things, and I think it was finding the way to find the emotional journey actually through the film, and when there was such a kind of lockdown actually from both of them, because there was so much hurt there and so much damage and so much, that actually to start finding ways to kind of unravel that through the film. And I think having that 6-year process, and actually we started to find it was the undercurrents that were where it was at, and to start exploring that place with them. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I can add something.
Just
I think, no, funding aside, I think one thing that I really learned in the process of making this film is how quick we are to put, well, we've tried to tell a story of survivors, and people very quick to put them back into a space of victimization, and that's this kind of, it's very difficult to get out of that loop and get out of that space. I really noticed it when we had a Kickstarter campaign last year, and a lot of press was very focused on what they'd lived through in the past, which wasn't at all, the story of the film wasn't at all what we were trying to say. And the fact that they kept being drawn back into that space is very much the stigma that they still live with today as a circus, that they still are dragged back to that space. So it really shows that what they're doing is so incredible, that against all odds they have this circus and they do what they do, and every single day they face that challenge.
And still are. Yeah.
And they also have to walk that line every time they get on the stage, because they go up and they tell their story, and it's part of their act, and it's part of who they are, and it's part of what they're trying to do is to tell their story. But at the same time, they're also trying not to be in the position of so they are always managing that, not being victims, but still telling their story. I think they do very well at it.
What's next for the circus?
They're doing a lot of work locally, so a lot of the outreach and impact work that's really key to their work now. And yeah, they're just, I mean, they operate all the time now with shows and outreach, but there's, it's difficult, and the earthquake had a huge impact on, what they'd built up, and so there's still a lot of work trying to sort of build things up again post earthquake. But they're doing well.
well, we're working with them as well, so that the film becomes an additional tool that they will use in their outreach, and kind of building up a network that they'll be able to use as well to kind of further the work that they do with more partners and hopefully more internationally as well.
And use it as a kind of talking point on their own tours, and a bit like you saw them in the village talking to the women, you know, just talking to people, and using it as a starting point for discussion, and in schools hopefully as well.
Well, I thought we would open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Got a couple here.
Hi, it was an inspiring story, so thank you for sharing. I'm also a documentary student, and we're just finishing up our final films, and I realized that in the beginning of the film, I kind of felt that they actually didn't really want to be filmed, and you are just there and kind of in like being there, and it felt like they didn't want to share their stories. But the more films move on, it feels like they get comfortable. And also seeing some more like Westerner circus people coming over there and helping them with their moves and everything. It kind of made me think how much of an empowerment you have on their movement, and how much of a self decision that they had to take to turn themselves into a circus in Nepal and keep doing that, and then eventually. And I also was curious, like, who organized the international shows? Like, did they wanted to do it themselves, or did you help them, and what kind of a relation there was?
So I think there was always elements of support there, you know, but we felt like it wasn't where we wanted the story to really be their story, and we felt like it would just have been tangents to go off into the various structures of help that were in place. But yeah, there was a support network, and still is a support network around them. Yeah.
And they were always, it wasn't all of them that joined that circus. There's a lot of people in that refuge, and plenty of circus returnees who didn't join. It was a group of them who really did enjoy performing, and who it became quite therapeutic to, in a way.
And it was very much their decision that then became facilitated with
and now they're independent and, you know, able to, I mean, you know, they do struggle, you know, for funding, as many circuses will, and it's difficult, but they do everything from the admin to the organisation and the management of the circus, and they've grown up in the process, because they were really kids whenever we first met them, most of them, so, yeah.
Excellent. I wanted to ask a little bit more about what you've got planned for distribution for the film, but particularly with Nepalese and Indian audiences, because that's going to be a real struggle. And I just wondered kind of how you're going about that, and what your plans are. Hallam.
Well, we pitched the film at the Good Pitch in Copenhagen a couple of months ago, and that was kind of the beginning of consolidating our plans in Nepal. I think, we wanted to get this film out there very quickly to start supporting the circus very quickly, because they're actually in quite a vulnerable position at the moment. And we are putting things in place for them to start working with it as soon as possible. We anticipate a festival release this year in Nepal, which will be followed by at least 12 kind of interventions with the film that the circus then works with in the course of the next year. We've got a range of partners on board to deliver that work, and yeah, it's all slowly but surely kind of falling into place.
And very much the circus and the film working together, as you said earlier, and looking at how they can really facilitate each other.
Yeah, so the first step is Nepal, really, and then the second year I think we'll start working in India, and we're working with certain foundations who already have networks in India to distribute the film in a kind of outreach network that way.
Thank you very much. I just came back from a film trip to Nepal, kind of covering 2 years post-earthquake. Were you I'm just curious, did the earthquake happen while, was it, I mean, of course it wasn't planned, but I mean, did it happen, like, were you already done filming and then it happened, and did it become kind of like a follow-up? And especially like looking at the trafficking part, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about how now post-earthquake, even 2 years later, trafficking is really on the up again because so many people lost their homes, still don't have money, can't sustain themselves, and that trafficking has become an increasing problem. I'm just curious how you see that.
We definitely weren't finished filming, were we?
It was like the eve of you were in Australia with the tree.
Yeah.
And it was the eve of, we wanted to launch a Kickstarter campaign. The earthquake happened on the eve of a Kickstarter campaign we were going to launch to finish the film, to pay for post.
Yeah.
So it became a third act, and that we weren't anticipating.
Yes, it's true, and I think it really sharpened that kind of outreach element of their work. They weren't doing that in such a focused way, and they really wanted to get out there into Nepal and help and do what they could. So yeah, that definitely became something we wanted to follow.
And you can see them in the film getting that training towards the end about, although they'd all been trafficked, there's still a lot of learning that they could do about the wider problem, and it was during that time that they really stepped up that side of it, and began to see themselves really as advocates and with a real job to do.
Yeah, because I think Glastonbury was going to be the end at one point, wasn't it? So it was definitely almost the end. Yeah.
But yeah, you were with them at the time, not filming, and deliberately not filming. But yeah, it was a difficult time for them being so far away when that hit.
Thanks. Congratulations. It's an amazing film. I was just wondering if the two of you could talk about ethnographic film and like your backgrounds in that, and how it informed the making of this film.
We still do a lot of film for research, and when we studied visual ethnography, visual anthropology as a master's, and that's how we met. That's how we all met, actually. Yeah. One of the ways I would say that that kind of our experience there informed me is the desire to make something that was made in a really respectful way and a collaborative way.
I think it's like approach, definitely approach, and like the agency and the collaborative, the feeling like you're actually doing something together as opposed to just going in and pointing a camera.
And which began as wanting to be very observational and just to kind of be there, as we often are in research filmmaking, where you kind of stand back a lot. Sometimes you participate, and sometimes you're there for longer periods of time. But we couldn't be in Nepal for a long period of time because we had no money. So it ended up being that desire to collaborate. Out of that came the much more constructed elements of the film, because working with them meant something different than doing a really observational style all the time.
Yeah, having and listening to what the storytelling required and
asking them what it required. And
that
so
shifted quite a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, we changed our approach an awful lot through that. I don't know. It's quite a big question.
Just shout. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Again, it's a terrific film. Oh, go on, I won't shout, I'll whisper. What about the boys' stories?
Good question.
They were shadowy figures who did a lot in the circus, but we never saw or heard the boys' stories.
I think we have to.
We have a lot of it in the rushes.
Yeah, we can make another film.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. Originally, they were a bigger part of it, and we did a lot of interview with them.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, there was so much, it just became more and more about following the two girls, just seemed to, make the whole story stronger. And we were aware that they were kind of a missing element to some degree, but at the same time we still sort of felt that it was needed to really focus on two of them to really strengthen the story.
But we kept little bits of them in there. the speaking, you know, because they came out at one point and then went back in, and the rooftop scene where he does his poem that he composed, BJ. I mean, they all have really fascinating stories, and it's a shame to have left them out. And they're a big part of the energy of the circus.
You know, five of them sort of leading the film at one point. It just wasn't working.
No.
It was diluted, and that's where we came to, really, in the end, with finding the strongest story.
And feeling like the story of the relationship with the families was quite important to us to keep in the film, and the mothers. And so that became a bigger part of the film in the end. We didn't meet the boys' families, so that was part of it too, I think. Wanting to tell the mothers' stories as well. Yeah, it's a shame. But
One last
question. So thank you for the film as well. I really appreciated it. And I'm just wondering about a few scenes, mostly with the daughter and the mother scenes, when they talk about did you miss me? Do you remember me? Kind of all these conversations popping up in the film. How did you go about it? Was it a setup that you did, or it just happened that you started talking about it as you were filming? And I was also wondering about the scene with the two girls on the
roof.
Yeah, on the roof. Yeah.
Well, I think there was always an element of working with them in a slightly constructed way. So it was, on the one hand, it was observational, and on the other hand, it was always through conversations with them, and how, like with meeting their mothers, that actually very much came from them, and talking on how do we, you know, keep telling this story. And I think the framework of the filming kind of emboldened them actually to have conversations that they really wanted to have. So I think anything else. And
no, I think because they were going to visit them anyway in those times, and we kind of went along, and
it was very much following their natural kind of rhythms. So that's kind of, you know, the film, you very much get a sense of their natural rhythms in terms of visiting family. And
but the fact that they start talking about that subject while we're there is not an accident, because, you know, we talked about it before to them, but it's something they wanted to go into with their mothers.
And with the rooftop again, I mean, obviously it's been arranged to some degree, but again, like for both of them, it was, I think Sital said it was for her the most powerful scene for her in the film, where she felt like it gave her a space to speak in a way that she really, really wanted to speak. So there was something about that space that we were creating with them that was facilitating a process of communicating and sharing.
By the time that the rooftop scene was filmed, we knew them quite well, and they knew us. And
so we were working kind of together, really, with the film. They'd seen shapes of the film, hadn't they? And
and they were good friends at that point. So when we said, you know, let's have a conversation and we'll film you, just talk about what you want to talk about, they felt comfortable to do that.
And actually, it was much more. There was a lot more candidness than I expected at that time, coming forward from the way.
Just before we wrap up, there's lots of our crew and team who are here. So Alice, our editor, Jerry, our composer, Ben and Susie, two of our DOPs. Mayor, who's in the film, Tris and Anna, who are big supporters. There's loads of people here who supported us on Kickstarter, and we're still really grateful for that. And also Fleur, who also has some stickers.
Oh, yes,
if any of you want to support Circus Kathmandu in their work, there's a little website that you can go to and find out how you can do that.
Or just wear a sticker.
They're pretty.
It's a beautiful sticker. And yes, and look out for the film, because we'll be doing some exciting work with it, with the circus in the UK as well as in Nepal.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.